We've reached the final component in the harness, and it often decides whether a capable agent can actually ship. I'm Mehrdad, and today we're covering governance and policy management for multi-agent systems. A policy the system cannot enforce is a wish, not a control. Governance turns written intent into runtime decisions, so consequential actions meet the rules before anything executes. Consider a familiar policy. Agents must not touch production data without approval. Someone writes that sentence in a wiki, reviewers approve it, and the organization starts calling the issue governed. But the agent never reads that page, and nothing consults it when a tool request reaches production. The document expresses an intention, but only a runtime check can change the execution path. In production, governance is code that sits directly in the action path, not a document published once and filed away. On every call, that layer decides what the agent may do, whose authority it carries, and which data it may access. It also determines what evidence gets recorded, turning policy, access, audit, and compliance into runtime behavior. If no control checks in action when it happens, you have documentation, not governance. Governance overlaps with guardrails, but these layers answer different questions and protect against different kinds of failure. A guardrail asks whether an action is safe, then blocks harmful content or dangerous operations before they reach the world. Governance asks whether this particular agent may take that action against that data under that authority. That decision requires identity, permissions, approvals, and an audit trail the organization can inspect later. Guardrails evaluate danger. Governance evaluates authorization and keeps the receipt. The mechanism is policy as code at the action boundary, where every tool call, data read, or agent handoff must pass first. The agent proposes an action, and the policy engine checks its identity, granted scope, and the relevant data boundary. The engine should deny, by default, allowing execution only when a policy explicitly permits the request. It can allow an authorized action, deny an out-of-scope action, and record every decision for audit. Most importantly, the prompt is irrelevant to this gate. A model may be persuaded to request something, but it cannot talk around enforcement that runs before execution. This runtime layer manages 4 connected pillars: policy, access, audit, and compliance. Policy defines which tools, actions, and data are allowed, while access establishes who is asking and under what scope. Audit preserves a tamper-evident, append-only trail of actions and decisions, so the system can reconstruct what happened. Compliance maps those controls to the framework your organization answers to and produces evidence when reviewers ask. These are familiar controls for people and services, now applied to autonomous, non-human actors. Identity becomes especially important when several agents delegate work across a graph. Give each agent its own identity and least privilege scope, rather than sharing one powerful service account across the system. When one agent delegates to another, the new grant must remain inside the delegator's authority and usually narrow further. Permissions should shrink down the delegation chain, never expand because another agent was created. For the highest stakes actions, place a human on the loop at a deliberate approval gate. That person does not watch every step, they decide at the few boundaries where one action justifies the pause. This is where many capable prototypes stall, because a regulated organization cannot deploy an agent it cannot govern. The risks include goal hijacking, tool misuse, privilege abuse, and agents drifting beyond their assigned task. Governance does not make those risks disappear, but it creates enforceable boundaries, attributable actions, and evidence for investigation. That is why governance is the last mile before production, not plumbing to add after the pilot. Teams that postpone it often discover their architecture cannot support the controls required to ship. Governance is the harness's control plane for authority, enforced and recorded. The model decides what it wants to do, while the harness decides what it is allowed to do and preserves the evidence. Separating capability from authority lets us improve the model without granting every new capability unrestricted access. The harness keeps the receipt, making autonomous behavior trustworthy enough for production. Carry 3 essential ideas into your own harness design. First, governance must be enforced in the action path, because a written policy alone cannot control a running agent. Second, guardrails ask whether an action is safe, while governance asks whether this agent is authorized and records the decision. Third, production governance needs distinct identities, narrowing delegation, meaningful approval gates, and auditable evidence before regulated systems can ship. Enforce the policy instead of merely publishing it, and the harness becomes a control plane rather than a collection of promises. This closes our component deep dives after walking through the harness piece by piece. If this series helps you, subscribe to Multi-Agent Academy and connect with me on LinkedIn. Next is video 16, Evaluating Multi-Agent Systems, where we'll evaluate the path through a run, not just the final output. I'll see you there.